Okay, I just turned on the live captions and we can start. And I started recording as well. Okay. So, good afternoon. Welcome everyone to our event, Disability Representation in Kenyan Media, and to our project launch. Thank you very much for being here this afternoon. The project is going to be recorded. The event is going to be recorded and uploaded to our project's website. So this is the project team. I'm the principal investigator, Dr. Katalin Brilla, principal lecturer in film and television. Then we have our co-ag, Dr. John Davula, senior lecturer in media. Our co-ag, Dr. Jackie Lidugwi, lecturer in mass communication. And Kevin Nayema, our research associate. These are our partners and funders. So the funder is the Arts and Humanities Research Council in the UK. We have 3 academic partners, Bournemouth University, Mungai University of Technology, and African Nazarene University. And these are our industry and community partners, the Kenya Broadcasting Corporation, the Kenya Union of Journalists, Science Media, Action Network for the Disabled, and the Global Alliance for Disability in Media and Entertainment. So the purpose of this event is to map the Kenyan media landscape in terms of disability representation on screen, and also to launch our project. So we'll first start with highlighting the timeliness of our projects. Then we'll have our keynotes. Then we'll have short presentations by our roundtable members, followed by a roundtable discussion. And then we'll have a project overview followed by a Q&A. So I'm going to hand over to my colleague, Dr. John Davula.
Thank you very much, Katalin, and for that introduction. Yeah, so I'm glad to see everyone here. And of course, you're wondering perhaps why should disability presentation on screen matter right now? Now, if you look at the last couple of years, next slide, Katalin, from 2010 up to 2026, if you look at what's been happening in terms of legal aspects, the era where media would include people with disabilities voluntarily, out of goodwill is over. And now the laws that we have mandate the inclusion of people with disabilities in media. If you look at the 2010 Constitution, Article 24, it guarantees dignity, equality, non-discrimination, and also affirmative action. If you fast forward to 2024, you have the Communications Authority Code, Broadcasting Code, which mandates broadcasters on how to include people with disabilities. If you look at the National Disability Policy, again, in the same year, 2024, again, it talks about mainstreaming equity, across gender, age, and disability. And the big milestones in 2025, you have the Persons with Disability Act, and also the Media Council, code, which work towards including persons with disability in media. So next slide. So if you look at what the legal provisions are, on one hand, so the law says we have to include people with disabilities. Now, if you look on the other side, on the TV side, we're looking at the programs that we have and what people in media need to do, but then there's no guide, because once the law says you have to do this, then we're asking, so where is this guide so that media practitioners can do it right? And that's the exact gap that this project wants to fulfill, whereby we are creating a toolkit which is tested, which is evidence-based, which media producers can use and produce good quality programs to fulfill this law mandate. So I think, Katalin, that would be my introduction to this project. Thank you. So next now, to bring us up to speed in this conversation, I'd like to welcome Honorable Isaac Mwaura, who is the government spokesman. He's also a disability rights advocate, and I think I've been with him in many forums, always willing, always ready to speak to us. He has a wealth of experience in public service, advocacy, and also inclusion. So he's going to speak to us on, perceptions of disability in Kenya and the role of media in shaping those perceptions, and also just the space of policy in terms of highlighting disability issues. Welcome sana Mheshimiwa to speak to us.
Thank you very much, Dr. Thank you, everybody. Dr. Jackie, thank you, the convener. Thank you for all the 40 of us who are here. Yes, I would like to start by saying that this is an issue that has been not just been in the media, but it speaks about the very imagery and representation of persons with disabilities to define their ability or lack of it thereof. And I would like to summarize it by my own reflections. Last week, I was thinking about this issue. But we may not look the part or be like it, but we are it. We can do it. Let me repeat again. We may not look the part or be like it, but we are it. We can do it. Now that what comes from experience of the fact that persons with disabilities do not represent how things are done. If you have somebody who is writing using their leg, it's not how people write, but he's writing anyway. If you have somebody who is driving a car using the hand, it's not how cars are driven. In fact, I remember one day I myself experienced driving the car and using controlling the brakes and everything with my hand in Mombasa. I was very surprised. But still, that person is driving the car anyway. Now, representation of people with disabilities in the media in general, I don't want us to just limit ourselves to the screen, because what my experience is, because I do communication on a daily basis, we are seeing a reduction from big screen to small screen. And so therefore people are no longer watching TV. And so it's about people making their own content. And therefore then, of course, the era of new media. Still, we are seeing the digitization of discrimination. And we cannot really say that people with disabilities are included and therefore represented as it should be. The good thing about it is that now we have, content creators with disabilities. I am enjoying very good music from people like Paul Manana, who they are singing, and you can see they're producing their own content. So that it has given us a space for people to show their own creativity, including our brother, who is a very good car expert, yet he's visually impaired. So that is a positive side of it. But then people now no longer, are hiding the whole idea of body shaming, for example. We've had very serious instances where people pick on someone and then they make a whole caricature of them. I personally have been a victim of the same. In fact, I think every time people don't want to agree with me, they will say, "Wewe tumekuachia jua." That is to mean that they are leaving me to the sun, of course, because of albinism. And of course, the way I have responded to that is by saying, I have my hat, I have my spectacles, I have my sunscreen, and if it's too hot, then I'll put on an umbrella, and then you make a joke of it and you move on, and then they have no comeback. We say in Kenya, they have no comeback. They can't come back to you. Remember also, just not in the recent past, Raila Odinga Jr., the son of Raila Odinga. People are ridiculing him because of the fact that he has a physical disability, in the manner in which he looks like, and even the mother had to come out strongly. We have had instances where even a member of parliament openly, spoke very badly against somebody who is of short stature in a public meeting. So the representation of people with disabilities in the media in general, as the research has shown, remembering even my studies at the University of Leeds UK Center for Disability and Development, is either you are a hero, where you have actually overcome all this, like disability is something to be overcome, so you are this superhero against all odds. And I think many of us here who have made it in one way or another have been cast in that way, that representation. or you are a zero, you're somebody who is there is an object of pity, being given a sick role, and of course, people getting some political or social mileage by helping the less fortunate. So then you see people, the image cast of people visiting schools for people with disabilities, be it Thika School for the Blind or Joyton or any other place, to help and assist, and therefore, of course, being seen to be good do-gooders, using the charity model. Is really very rampant a representation in our media. Obviously, also the other aspect that also comes out very strongly is that when people are also producing content, much as now, for example, the laws require that you have to have subtitles and captioning and the Kenya Sign Language interpretation, but when you come to individual, videographers and vloggers and TikTokers, that is not being adhered to. So you can then see, because of the quickness of using the phone is the one that we are using to consume our content and to get news 97% from the research that we've done recently. And so therefore then that then becomes a gap. And that is why in my office, for example, you come up with what you call inclusive communication guidelines, so that we are able to help people to know what is it that they need to do. It's still work in progress to ensure that the such content is produced. Now, in my office, for example, I made sure that all the video content has a sign language interpretation to the maximum extent possible. Sometimes it's not possible because of the nature, but we are trying our level best. And that, of course, calls for more Kenya Sign Language interpreters. I was very impressed, for example, when I visited Taj Mahal in India, early this month. And I found they had a braille, kind of a thing there for people to read and to understand the history. So when you talk about media, please remember the word is medium. And so therefore it's a mode of communication. It's in betweenness. It's an entrepreneur kind of thing. It's an interlocutor thing there. And so the person with the megaphone, the person who is helping to tell the story. Because if you look at it, even this meeting, there are so many things that are happening. But what we get to watch at night, if at all we really make an appointment to do so nowadays, is what somebody else has edited for presentation to the would-be audiences. And so therefore, my fellow activists and champions, we still have a lot of work to do, because the biases that have existed traditionally, even when there is a lot of information, they still persist. And it's still the battle of the mind. You still find that even when persons with disabilities have occupied senior roles, they still, work with the background of the society, thinking that they are not as good enough, and that is something that we need to keep on challenging. So yes, we in one way or another, it is already something that people can can see, and it is criminal. Maybe it's against the law as per Article 54, Article 1 of the Constitution. Against the New Persons with Disabilities Act, the new disability policy. But to put this into practice, it will take a lot of innovation. It will take a lot of, providing alternative views of disability. In terms of like this can be done, so that increasingly and gradually we are able to challenge the images. I still want you to understand that my keynote address here is not really generally talking about the do's and don'ts in the media. That I can leave to people who are, to media legalism, if we can talk about it. I'm looking at it, the whole representation. How is a person with disability represented, and why then we need to have those positive stories is because they tend to normalize our stories, and make that then we can live normal lives, so that then not every time when you are seen in the media, people then start seeing as if you are an exception rather than the rule. And from my personal journey, and allow me to use this because maybe that's also part of the reason why you invited me. I have had people with albinism telling me, for example, that then I am a point of reference. I just talked to somebody who came to visit me, when I went to visit my mother on Sunday. And she told me that at least we have a point of reference. Now, that's what we need to do. So that when people present evidence to the contrary, then they are able to say, no, there's actually a counter narrative. I think the word here is narrative. But what is an enduring narrative? So when you come from the traditional, background where people are seeing persons with disabilities as objects of pity, stigma, discrimination, taboo, all those things that have been associated with albinism. with disability, with visual impairment, with physical disability, with whatever type of impairment that we have, then you cannot then sometimes forgive them when they show that even when really we are trying to show that we can do it. And why am I saying that is because let me just tell you a story of how sometimes some of these representation morphs. I was brought a child who is about maybe 2 years, I forget the real age, but the mother was abandoned by the father of the child, ostensibly because this child has albinism, and so I am supposed to be the father, like you got a child with Mwaura. So you see, during my time, it was like my father was a white man or my mother was unfaithful. But now you can see now, even with the right representation, people then are still using that as an excuse. So what does that tell us? We need to continuously model. We need to continuously model, and that even when we attain, positive representation of ourselves, we are in the face, we are in the screen, we are doing it every day. It does not necessarily mean that we've overcome the biases, because those biases are the ones that then make us to either be a hero or a zero. We got to make sure that we have, disability as part and parcel of the normal, and because when that is done, then it becomes a point of reference. I remember, for example, when the Kenya Revenue Authority was employing a revenue service assistants, and they couldn't accept those with disabilities because they had to go through parliamentary training. Thank God we had started that program with the National Youth Service. So, and the people with disabilities that had been locked out. And so what I had to do is to send them photos and videos of them in the field, them graduating at NYS, and then make believe. So we must therefore then look at the media representation within the wider context of content creation. We must also look at it as the spaces that help us to see the lives of people with disabilities on a normal basis, on how they are living their lives. I've seen several, one or two or couples of people with disabilities, doing like real show, real life show on their socials, and they have many followers. And that way, then we are able to reduce stigma and discrimination. But also, there's an opportunity to train and retrain in our people. Before you could go large scale because then you could target the media houses. But then now you have this small scale retail kind of thing that then you need to target as many people as possible. So yes, I actually call this algorithmic fragmentation and the colonization of the borderless, because then anyone can influence whatever from whatever side of the world. So we are borderless, and I'm happy that this is actually a kind of an international engagement, because I can see many people from different nationalities. So yes, in a nutshell, we've made progress. We have the laws. And maybe also, as I conclude, the way, for example, you have been regulating the media is either through, ownership, who owns the media. That is no longer, the case, because anyone now is a journalist, or they can broadcast from their socials. The real owners of the media are the social media apps owners, the meta groups, the X's and what have you, as exemplified by the owner of X, who say they are the real media. Number two, the way we have also been regulating is through like advertisement, where you'd actually pay the media to carry your story. But now you have online advertisement, and most of the money is even going offshore. And number three, of course, is the issue of laws. And you can see how people have become very lethargic to hearing, that they have actually new laws, as exemplified by the finance bill, or even the cybercrime, bill, and the protests and people going to court. So we therefore then need to look at it from what we are concluding as media practitioners, as communication practitioners, is that the best way then to do that is to have superior content. To have superior content that is attractive, because it's no longer about policy, it's about also how you package the content and how it gets viral and how it goes around it. Obviously, we have the kind of downside of it that for persons with disabilities to get acceptance within the mainstream of society, sometimes then you become the court gesture, you caricature it. And you had people with disabilities who made a career or a living out of looking the funny man in the room. We have even programs in Kenya like Vioja Mahakamani, like Inspector Mwaura, that have had people with disabilities of a certain orientation, so that you become the laughing stock. But then in the process, so there is a way in which therefore then comedy and all of that. Of course, it has got a positive side, its negative side. We can't condemn it all along. It's part of creativity, because of when you say that people cannot do it, then you are being too serious. Maybe you also must make some humor about it. But in the end, the most important way to look at it is what is the residual effect? What do people think when they see us on TV? What is the first reaction? How do they what comes into their mind? It's a journey. We made progress, but there's still a lot to be covered. Otherwise, we must always certify. We must have, events and activities that help to tell what we are able to do. Once again, let me close by my opening a quote that we may not look the part or be like it, but we are it. We can do it. I thank you.
Thank you very much, Mheshimiwa. Thank you very much, Honorable Isaac Mwaura, for that very powerful introduction. So at the moment, I'd like to invite Dr. Jacqueline Lidubwe to take it from here. But before she comes, I know there's a way you'd want to interact with what Honorable Mwaura has said. Please feel free to type in the chat and we'll respond to all the comments and queries. Welcome, Dr. Jacqueline Lidubwe.
Thank you so much, Dr. Ndabula, and thank you so much, everyone. And Honorable Mwaura, thank you for that powerful keynote speech. So moving on, we have a distinguished panel of academicians, scholars, and activists. And we are going to have Dr. Mbugua, Senior Lecturer, Kenyatta University, Skita Imisa, Producer Able Differently, KBC, Yinka Olaito, all the way from Nigeria, Dr. Winnie Ndeta from St. Paul's University, and Paul Mugambi, a disability activist. So to start us off, we'll start with Dr. Mbugua Mungai, Senior Lecturer and immediate former Director, Disability Services at Kenyatta University. And Dr. Mbugua is going to help us reflect on the kinds of disability portrayals we currently see in media and which ones are most harmful or most helpful. Karibu sana, Daktari.
Thank you. Thank you for inviting me. It's an important discussion that I feel we all need to contribute to. In the short space of 3 minutes, I can only talk about one key issue. Yes, there has been increased visibility of disability in the media. That's a fact, especially since the coming into effect of the 2010 Constitution. We have seen a lot of stories about disability in the media, whether you're thinking about mainstream media or social media. But my interest is in the quality of the stories that are told there. Two things are striking in the kind of stories that we see. First, we tend to see a predominance of stories told from the charity perspective. The charity model is quite prevalent in this country. And the fact that we have a lot of Christians about disability, as Mwaura said, this makes it possible for those stories to find traction with audiences. And for me, that is an important place for us to begin asking, how is it that we can get that toolkit that was referred to in the introduction by Ndabula? How do we get that toolkit to begin engaging with models of disability that we may want to advance, particularly within the purview of the 2010 Constitution of Kenya and the human rights work that disability advocacy and the rights movement is all about. So we need to think about that. And number two, I always ask myself, when I see this predominating picture of disability in Kenyan media presented from the charity model perspective, I always ask myself, who tells these stories? How well trained, how well prepared are they to tell stories about disability? Because the assumption seems to be that just about anybody can write a story on disability. Yes, that's easy to do. But how many people can write a sensible story about disability in a manner that they can use the forum to challenge structures, to challenge systems that make it impossible for people with disabilities to get on with their lives. I am personally not happy when media houses, writers look for specific people who have achieved and hold those up for everybody else to see. I'm not saying those achievements are not worth the while. All I'm saying is, when you hold up only particular people, what are you saying about people with disabilities who have not achieved the things that we think are worth talking about? Are we saying that their stories are not worth telling? Everybody with a disability has a story, and that story should be used to look at the broader socio-economic, political issues in society that make it impossible for other people to get to the top. So that, yes, it is important to have icons of the movement, but it is also important for us to understand that other than the icons, there are regular guys with disability who are just struggling to make ends meet, and who also need to have their stories told so that society can understand properly what those obstacles they face are. Lastly, I see a lot of stories presented in Kenyan media that are presented by writers who are wholly uncritical of the material they present. For example, in one of the national dailies today, there is a story about learners with special needs. I opened that story last night when the electronic paper came out, and I wanted to understand what are the real issues. Yes, I know these schools are underfunded, the schools they attend. I know they need teachers, trained teachers. But then the question is, beyond what the CS, the Minister for Education, told a specific forum as to why these learners do not have these schools funded to the level that we need to, as to why they don't have gadgets. Why doesn't the writer of such a story take the minister's question and critique it? Because you can't be telling us the same answers today as we were told 30, 20 years ago about the same problem. When in that story, the Teacher Service Commission was challenged to state why these schools are under-resourced in terms of teachers, the answer that the CEO of the TSC gave was not critiqued. It was just left at that. So you want to ask yourself, why are these stories being told at all if the data, if the policies, if the implementers tell you things that you do not question? So I would want to see stories that are much more nuanced in terms of the way they present these stories so that we understand where the lapses, the actual lapses are. I think my 3 minutes are over, so I will leave it at that. We can come back to the matter. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mbugua or Mungai. Everybody with a disability has a story. So moving on to Skita Inisa, producer of the Able Differently show on KBC. And Skita will also give us a producer's perspective on where the biggest challenges to inclusive representation occur in media production story. So over to you, Skita.
Thank you so much, Jackie. Hope you can hear me.
Yes, Skita.
Okay, so maybe to start off, I'll pick from what Dr. Mbugua said. He talked about how well we are prepared before we produce content on disability. And for production, it's all about preparation with several stages before we come up with content or whatever form, in whatever form we want it to be. So for me as a producer, despite the fact that we might have some barriers in the several stages of our production stages, but the most critical stage is always the development stage during pre-production. Because at this stage, you're putting everything together, your idea, the people who will work within that production, the scripting, even the final look, how you will want it to be. So once you miss out some issues at this particular stage, it becomes very hard to fix them along the way. So All the stages are affected and they cause barriers, but the most important one is development. When you come to something like casting, and when I talk about casting, I do not want just to base on dramas for auditions. Even the talk shows, how we are selecting our panels, news anchors. Do we deliberately sit down before these productions and say, before we hire the cast, the actors, the panel for a talk show, where is the voice of people with disabilities? And it does not need to be on matters of disability, any other issue, politics, because they have something to say about that. So as a producer, once I'm making this preparation and I miss out on that, then I'll see that barrier during let's say the talk show. Maybe somebody comes in, let's say even just a person with disability or not, then they bring in an issue that touches on a disability. As the host of the program, if you are not prepared for such conversation, you'll just listen through and let it pass. But if you're prepared, you'll be keen or eager to know more about it. So then at that production stage, because you missed on the selection, you also missed on the production stage. And so many issues are in between. Then we go to the last stage, the post-production, editing, where we are talking about maybe even having a sign language interpreter. We are talking about having captions. We are talking about including maybe people who might have problems when they see certain images on screen. So if you did not also have this plan when you are doing the development of the content, during the editing stage, you definitely miss out on this. So then at the end is when you'll be struggling to find somebody to fit in, somebody who was not there at the beginning of this development. They might hack through and give you what you wanted. Sometimes you miss it all through. And also distribution. How are we distributing the content? So as a producer also, if I missed on this, definitely when I distribute my content, I might cover some people who have disabilities, but some will definitely lose. They won't be able to even know that that content exists. So producing the program Able Differently has had its own challenges. We learn every day. We've missed a lot, but you miss, you pick up, you correct it in the next stage, and you at least try to learn. I know my colleagues in media, most of them are really shying away from doing this because we don't know how, we don't know where to begin. And especially when it comes to language has become the greatest barrier. So for me, I feel once we are sorted in terms of language, even the angle, the framing will itself just fall in place. So maybe just to hope that by the end of the project, we'll have more people in media putting out content on disability issues. And Dr. Mwaura has talked about even content producers who have disabilities. Once they tell their stories, we see it, we learn from them. Nowadays, it's an open platform. Everybody is putting out their content. So we pick out the best practices. Those ones that we feel we don't understand, we ask. And we ask them because they know why they are putting it out that way. They know how they are putting it. So after that, Jackie, thank you. I don't think I have much to say.
Thank you so much, Skita, for the job you are doing, for making sure my baby is still alive on KBC Channel 1 Able Differently. Thank you for that. And we are also hoping at the end of this project, we are going to have so many producers and media houses adopting stories and developing content on disability. So moving on, I want to introduce a special friend of mine all the way from Nigeria, Yinka Olaito. So Yinka Olaito is a journalist, a podcaster, and a disability inclusion expert. And Yinka is going to speak on how people with disability can have a stronger voice and influence in how they are represented in the media. Welcome, Yinka.
Thank you, Jackie, and thank you, other speakers. It's an honor to be part of this conversation. I appreciate everything that everybody has said, but one position based on my own experience. I remember one of the speakers said, every person with disability has a story. So, but the question is, that story, is it something worth telling? Because the way we position our story is important. Media are looking for media organizations are looking for stories that are worth telling and that will resonate with their audience. So the question is, if you person with disability have to increase the higher stake, I think number one thing that comes to my mind as somebody who has been in field for some time is every person with disability need to build their personal knowledge so that they can be able to tell the story, their own story, in a way that resonates with others. Everybody likes to listen to story, but can your story resonate with other person? That's why the power of storytelling. How much of storytelling ability do you know, and how much of that capacity can you build as a person with disability? So media is always looking. The media is organization are always looking for story to tell, but they are looking for a person who has a level of expertise that can convince them and their audience and their target that they actually have a story to tell. You can have a good story, but the way you tell it can also be very, very, very unconvincing. So my first position for a person with disability is, if they actually want to increase their stake, they need to develop their storytelling ability, increase their position as somebody who has real lived experience and be able to communicate that real lived experience very well to the society or the media audience target. Other thing that I've also seen is the fact that within the disability ecosystem, there's need for us to build a high level of unity, because there are quite a lot of things that are still happening within the disability ecosystem today, based on my experience, based on my interaction, and that there's a high level of disunity within the disability community itself. And therefore, you can only win a story, or you can only win when there's unity. For instance, one of the things that I keep challenging is when it comes to name and nomenclature, different country has what they use for different things. We're still the ecosystem is still arguing. We are not agreeing on a very unique term that all we can use. Different countries use different terms and terminologies and language. And language is very important. That's number one thing that I think that unity of purpose and unity of direction is important for disability ecosystem if we are going to increase our high stake in the media representation on the screen. Then I think that media, a person with disability can also begin to build their own capacity to have their own media, to own their own media. We can have media, disability-led podcasts. We can have disability-led TV and print stations, and this will give them more opportunity and leverage to actually increase their stake, because they can actually tell their story using their own platform. How much investment are we making? How much development are we making as person with disability to actually ensure that we own our own media? Because every media organization has their own target and their purpose. And don't also forget that making money is also part of the system. Media sustainability is something that is coming up almost every now and then. So can we have person with disability develop their capacity to the level they can own their own media platform? Podcast is everywhere, TV station, print station, and all of that. Because when we have that, we can actually use our platform for a public interest and public good. We all know international media, they have a bent. When you listen to Fox, when you listen to CNN, each of them has a bent. So if we have disability-led media stations, podcasts, and all of that, we can also begin to include our own bent into it. And maybe because of our time, I also want to say finally that person with disability has to consciously and intentionally be sure that they are available and they're visible. Media will want to interview somebody who has a story and who is visible. They just don't want novice to come in. They want people who are visible, who are known. So they want to be. They want you to be seen as expert. So with all these, I think that because of timing, we cannot exhaust it within 3 minutes. But I think that if we look at all this, it is possible for a person with disability, the ecosystem, to actually increase our stake within the media platform. Thank you, Jackie. Back to you.
Thank you so much, Yinka, for that nugget of wisdom. And now I introduce my lecturer, Dr. Winnie Ndeta, who is a senior lecturer at St. Paul's University and a passionate advocate for disability inclusion. So Dr. Winnie is going to explore how people with disabilities can work together with media professionals to change the negative social attitudes. Karibu sana, Daktari.
Thank you so much, Jackie, for including me in this roundtable. And following the presentations by my colleagues, the question is, for us to get the story, you have to get it from the horse's mouth. Now, there's a common quote in the disabilities sector that nothing about us without us. I'm thinking a scenario where you want to write about autism. It's possible that people can tell you about autism, but the best approach would be if you can be able to listen from a person who has autism, or they actually live with a person with autism, or they are a caregiver. So to collaborate with the mainstream media, I would suggest 3 things in terms of strategic partnerships, because it is about bringing a story from a person who lives the life, the disability, like Honorable Mwaura said. So it's not about reporting, but really listening from the person themselves. So this means partnership between the media houses and people with disability. And also the other suggestion is on the storytelling. We cannot do without storytelling. And this story is authentic if it comes from a person who lives that life themselves. So through having the networks, I know the local media are really working towards this. I see nowadays, much as we're saying that the representation is not accurate, but the media is also going out of their way to listen to the story from the first or from the primary sources. And also, people with disabilities should be willing and available to share authentic stories. And by sharing these authentic stories, that is how people come to learn about the disability. And also then we are working towards creating an inclusive environment. So by coming out also and sharing these authentic stories, then we are able to, at the end of the day, change the story from the charity model to a more inclusive society. Also, by coming out to do advocacy or to speak through the mainstream media, we are able to also open up spaces that then even allow the media, because through the media, the society gets informed and it creates awareness and also sets an agenda. So by coming out and speaking about our disability, or the people with disabilities speaking about their story, it helps to set the agenda and it also helps to create awareness. So I think that those strategic partnerships, the storytelling model, and also structured training, because sometimes I may have a story, but the story might not be so attractive. You know, the media is also out to get audiences. So by then having these targeted trainings, that media houses can maybe train organizations for people with disability in the best storytelling techniques that can then help them to come up with content that will also help to get the audience that the media is looking for. So those are the 3 areas that I want to recommend. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Daktari, for your takeaways. Next is supposed to be Paul. I can't see Paul online. Is Paul here? Paul Mugambi? So Paul is supposed to be our last but not least speaker, but earlier on he had some difficulties joining in, but we'll still listen to him when he joins in. So thank you so much, our speakers and even the participants. I can see a lot of discussions going on the wall. I can see Honorable Isaac Mwaura helping us to answer some, so keep the conversation coming. Keep the questions coming. And right now, I just want to thank the speakers so far for the good job we have done. We are still on, and I will hand the program over to Dr. Katalin.
Okay, thank you very much, Jackie. So we'll have now a short roundtable discussion, and I would like to invite our speakers to ask any questions they have to the other speakers. Is there anyone who would like to start with a conversation?
My question will go to the first speaker, Dr. Mungai. You were talking about portrayal, disability portrayal in the currently set. My question to you is, how do these portrayal influence public attribute policy decision making, or even how person with disability are seen themselves?
Yes, thanks, Yinka. That's an interesting one. The charity model in this country has done us, those people who work in the disability space, a lot of disservice. And here, Dr. Mwaura alluded to this, this is the point at which we leave people with disabilities to demonstrate as objects of pity the goodness of other people. So we are using people with disabilities to validate the spiritual and moral goodness of others. So a governor of a particular county comes out to donate food or some walking aids to people with disabilities, and we say, oh, this is a man of God. This is, and without belaboring the point, this is the mindset that people in this country have tended to have all along. And so the problem becomes, one, when people with disabilities themselves buy into this narrative and see themselves as objects of pity, as objects of charity, and they refuse to question a system that places them at that point without giving them opportunities to do things for themselves. Remember, even when we go back to the UN Convention, CRPD, one of the principles that underscores all work on disability rights is the principle of dignity, the dignity of human persons. How do we enable people to live their lives, even with their disabilities, in a dignified way? And that also means once people become independent, they can live their independent lives in ways that confer dignity to them. But you see, for us, if we stick to the arms culture of churches, of mosques, of traditional societies, we are never going to get to a point where in public discussions, we actually see that it is not the desired thing to create objects of charity out of people with disabilities. And number two, other than people with disabilities accepting this negative perception of themselves, there's also people who control media spaces. How, for example, I remember 2 weeks ago or three, there was a case in a part of Kenya where people had been called together for a government program to receive certain funds, which is well and good because it is the youth that were being ushered into the road for empowerment. But there was one girl, I think she was from Kakamega, who walks on the hot tarmac with the stamps of her feet. The story was carried in one of the national dailies. And I followed that story and asked, what did this writer hope to achieve with this story? At the end of reading that article, the only thing I came out with was that I should pity this girl and look for ways of donating money to help her, without asking, what is it that the National Council officer in that county, what did they do to try and enable the people with disabilities apply for government funding because it was going to everybody. So what was the role of institutions that government has put in place to enable people to succeed? But you see now, those are the things I was saying earlier. We need people who can critique this, the structures that these stories suggest are not working, so that we do not end up just with a pity story, but we move beyond that to see what are the actual problems with the system, because there are problems with the system, there are problems with the structure, and we will not address them by just playing up pity stories.
Okay.
Thank you, Dr. Mungai.
Thank you. Thank you very much for the response. We have time for one more question, so we can move to our next section. Is there one more question from the roundtable speakers?
Maybe I should ask Kita another question. I'm really interested in what she shared around media production. So the first question I will ask Kita is, who should be held accountable where representation is poor? Do we have to hold the creator, the producer, the platform, or the audience responsible? Who should be held responsible?
Thank you, Yinka. In production, the producer is the boss. I can say that. So by the end of the production, the final product is a responsibility of the producer. He or she is able to control, make decisions, accept, deny some of the decisions that are being done. So the responsibility lies with the producer.
That's fantastic. Thank you for sharing.
Okay.
Except,
Thank you. Thank you very much for our roundtable speakers. Unfortunately, in the interest of time, we need to move on to our next bit. So I'm going to talk a bit about the project. We already had a few questions about the details of the project. So this is a real rough overview. And then during the next 12 months, we'll send more updates via our social media channels. So our project is called Reducing Disability Stigma Through Media Representations in Kenya. So our main aim is to change ableist attitudes through media representations on screen. Of course, we do acknowledge that representation is also important off screen, behind the camera, but because there are other projects and initiatives focusing on that, we would like to complement those and specifically focus on this. However, as you will see later, one of our main phases, it does bring together people from the disability community and media professionals to work together in an inclusive way and create media content. So we don't just look at disability on screen, we also look at it off screen. But our toolkit will be about on-screen representations. Anyway, our research objectives are these ones. So we'll first analyze stigmatizing and non-stigmatizing disability representations in Kenyan media. Then we'll identify opportunities and barriers to improving disability representation in the Kenyan media industry. Then we'll develop and test a toolkit to support Kenyan media creators in reducing stigma. And our fourth objective is to facilitate inclusive collaborations between the disability community and media creators in implementing this toolkit. These are our four phases of the project. It's a one-year project. The first phase looks at media content. It uses discourse analysis to analyze 30 media texts across different genres, and this will help us to develop conceptual framework for the toolkits. In phase 2, we'll do a media industry study where we interview 10 media professionals and we do a focus group with 10 more media professionals. So here we are consulting with the media industry stakeholders, including our partners at advisory board, about our conceptual framework, and we refine it. In phase 3, we consult the disability community. So we interview 10 disability community members, and we do a focus group with 10 more members. So here's where we hear from their perspective with lived experiences about our framework. In phase 4, we have a disability representation festival of 3 days in person. which will include knowledge exchange sessions to translate the framework into a concrete toolkit co-created with our partners, community members, and advisory boards. And this will also be complemented by creative development workshops in which media professionals and disability community members are coming together to develop new media outputs using our toolkits. So what is our toolkit? We call it the Disability Representation Toolkit. It's the first comprehensive, research-tested, and industry-validated resource co-created directly with broadcasters and community members. It will be relevant for content creators because it offers practical evidence-based tools for writing, casting, and authentic on-set production. It's also relevant for commissioners because it will offer the evaluation of metrics to ensure commission projects meet both legal mandates and authentic representation standards. It will be very relevant to policymakers as well because it will allow the real-world data to be refined through future iterations of the National Disability Policy and Media Codes. And it will be relevant to diversity monitoring bodies because it will offer a standardized framework for tracking the mandated gradual increase in accessible programming. How do we evaluate the impact? We will do surveys and interviews with festival participants during and after our festival and the workshops. We'll also have an end event where we have an update of the developed media projects, and we will apply for follow-up funding to continue the project and implement and test the toolkit in the wider industry. Also to mention that we have a UK sister project in which we partnered up with the main broadcasters like BBC and Channel 4. And the sister project is quite similar in the regards that the first two phases are about analyzing media content and seeking consultation from the industry and the community. But the last two phases are more focused on audience research, where we'll use the toolkits in audience research studies in qualitative and quantitative methods. So the two projects complement each other in a way that we'll do knowledge exchange between the two teams in Kenya and the UK, and it will allow us a really rich conversation and contextualization of the toolkit in different cultural contexts. So I'm going to hand over to my colleague Jackie now for the Q&A.
Yes, thank you, Katalin, for that comprehensive update about our project. Now we are moving on to Q&A, and I've seen so many questions on the group, and we have provided a lot of answers. So if there is a particular issue that is burning, I would like you to raise your hand, and then we are going to unmute. Yes, I've seen Sarah, and also I would like, I don't know if Onzere Mdangare is on the call. He had also asked us if he can make a contribution, someone who is coming all the way from the rural country to talk about maybe disability and disability representation. So Sarah, you will go first, and if Principal Onzere Mdangare is on the call, kindly be next. Sarah?
Okay, thank you. My name is Sarah Gorenga. I'm from Uganda. When I saw LinkedIn, I was really very much interested to join and listen to the conversation. Myself, I'm a journalist from Uganda, and I work with New Vision, particularly covering stories on persons with disability. I'm basically media and a disability advocate. I've had conversations from the panelists, and I wanted to pose my question straight from Dr. Well, as a media, we've played our role in showcasing stories of persons with disability, and I agree with what he said that sometimes we showcase them in a charity model, and sometimes in a big way, or I concur with what he said. But now, even as media, we sometimes find some challenges. that much as we give platforms to persons with disability in a both positive and negative way, as we might be judged, but you realize that even organizations of persons with disability are not coming up to support these platforms. And my question is why? Are we doing it in the wrong way? And when you approach such organizations to support such platforms, so that we might continue keeping these platforms to create awareness on disability, organizations, they will tell you that they do not have budget for media. And when you leave them behind, they complain. So how can we work both with the donors, the funders, the partners to see that we keep such platforms? Because we're also advocating for inclusion. I don't know whoever can help me answer that, because myself I've been in the media for the last 8 years, but I've been purposeful only creating awareness on disability. But you reach at a moment where you're frozen, you're not getting support from any partner, and the question is, how can we account for that content now? Donors will ask how many. What is the number of viewers that we've reached? We want the beneficiary to gain from the funds, but not from the media. So how can we make that relationship between the media and the partners? Thank you so much, Jacqueline.
So Jackie, do I attempt to answer that question?
Yes, please, Hon.
Yes, thank you. Thank you very much, Onzere. I think that's a very good question, and you are very spot on. And I am speaking to you in both capacities of being the government spokesman of the Republic of Kenya, but also as an activist and an advocate for persons with disabilities. So generally, so I'll answer it in different ways. Generally, media coverage is influenced by also the fact that who is paying it for it. And there is this notion now with the advent of social media that communication is now free. It is not. Actually, communication is very expensive. It is expensive because you pay for you to reach as many people as possible. And people are now comfortable trending in their own circles. So if you are not in the same WhatsApp group, it's an echo chamber. Sometimes you don't get to know what's happening out there. So there's information overload. Now, in that space, then what happens? You got to be in as many platforms as possible, and that costs money, be it in terms of advertising online, be it in terms of having bloggers to push your content. Like these are the latter-day newspaper distributors, because they push, either it's Facebook or WhatsApp particularly. So you need such people, and you have to maintain them. And when it comes to mainstream media, for you to have your content aired, then it has to be. Now, two ways of financing. Is either through the mainstream advertisement platforms where you actually pay for space. This one is shrinking over time, especially because of the online aspect, and people, the rates also were very high when there was dominance of the big media. Now people are not willing to pay such huge amounts of money. I'm speaking from experience. But also there's that informal way of doing it, the way where we call brown envelope journalism, which is a fact, really, and we cannot ignore it. You may have even the right content, but if you don't facilitate the media, it becomes an issue. And especially because our journalists are not well paid. And increasingly, we are seeing media houses shutting down. And that in itself has had a very serious effect on who gets covered. If you look at the Kenyan scenario, for example, politics then carries the day, because then politicians are able to have this, below the line kind of payment for media. But the bottom line is, and this should go to all the funders and even NGOs that are here, if you don't have a budget line, then don't expect much of it to be done. It's not another charity. Don't just think that this is a good story that will be carried just because you know. Because even here in Kenya, we've had science media, science TV. And at some point, they were really suffering to meet their bills. I remember looking for a donor for them or some media project, which still did not go through. But I think of late, they have been supported in one way or another. I'm not speaking on their behalf. They can best articulate, but they have struggled even to find people who can even put adverts there. Yet they are fully dedicated to those who have, who are deaf. But the bottom line is, after all is said and done, it doesn't matter As long as you pay for it, it shall be covered. So get the money. I thank you.
Thank you so much, Honorable Mwaura, for that reply. And also, Sarah, I would encourage you, follow me on LinkedIn or DM me. I'll give you some of the tips to use, having been a producer of Able Differently for so many years, without a sponsor, without support. But I'll tell you the secret of keeping on and the advantages and disadvantages, so we can talk offline. I've seen Liz Otanye hand up.
Great,
So we
thank
can have
you.
Liz. Yeah, so we can have Liz and then we summarize this. I think we are past time. So
My
Liz.
apologies. I'll make it very brief. I'm usually concerned when it comes to sustainability of projects. And I think the way you're selling this particular project, it looks like it's a new idea that has not been tapped into, which I don't think it's the case. So what has happened after the Trump administration, the pulling out of funding, especially USAID, our Kenyan government has decided, well, a little bit too late, that all the projects that are being implemented need to literally feed into government priorities and directives. So my question is, how is this project fitting into the overall agenda when it comes to persons with disabilities? And what is the sustainability mechanism? I mean, I've had you say you're going to pitch for another funding for another duration, a couple of years. But ideally, in the long run, how sustainable is this? Or is it going to be one of those amazing projects that we'll use as a South-to-South landing, but it's going to be a dead end in the long run? Thank you.
Thank you so much. I would also like to take it up. Liz, having worked on a USAID-funded program, training journalists on disability reporting in sub-Saharan Africa, it is somehow related to this program. So what we are doing, we are putting journalists, activists, people who are in the space together and coming up with a toolkit. So with that toolkit and empowerment, with or without funding, it should continue going on. So I might just use the example for the project we are doing. We were coming up with champions of disability inclusion and reporting in media houses. So we managed to train several journalists in sub-Saharan Africa. And after that project ended, we still have journalists who are our champions and who are on this call, continuing reporting on disability issues. Why? Because they have the information, they have the knowledge, they have the conviction, they know the importance of why disability matters, so it continues. That's why it is more of a knowledge exchange. So with or without funding, we are hoping that the stakeholders or the people in the project can hold on and can carry on the mission with or without funding. Thank you.
Sorry, can I just add to this, because I think Liz intervention is really important when it comes to research projects, that they often look very impressive and grand, but then they don't become sustainable, especially after the date they finish. So I think that's a really, really important point. And we regard our project as putting a foundation, like a pilot, where we co-develop the toolkit with the community partners, the industry partners, and then in the next stage, we want to implement it. So this is a pilot that establishes the foundation, and on that we'll build. So it's a longer term project.
Thank you so much. Any burning issue? Please follow us on our social media platform. I hope, yeah, those are our social media platforms. We are on Facebook, LinkedIn, we are on X, and our website is coming up soon. And I would sincerely want to thank all the speakers for sharing their time, expertise, and lived experiences with us today. I also appreciate all the participants who joined and contributed to this important conversation. Special thanks to our partners, KBC, Andy, Science TV, Kenya Union of Journalists, and all our advisory board. I've seen some of them here, Beth Hala all the way from US. I've seen Alice Mundia, and so many of them are here. Thank you so much. And all the institutions that are supporting us. I've seen disability activists, my friends, Marianne, Karen, and all of them. Thank you so much for making time. And even the new friends and all those who are joining in from outside Kenya, thank you so much. We hope that we are going to continue with this conversation. We are going to critique each other, and we are going to develop each other on this journey. So on behalf of the organizing team, thank you for joining us, and we look forward to continue the engagement as we work towards more inclusive media in Kenya and even in Africa as a whole. Asanteni sana.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Jackie, Kathleen, and everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
It's an opportunity to be here.
Asanteni sana.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone. Thank you.